And welcome back to the Northland Sports Page coverage of the NFL Draft on your Thursday night. Nice to have real sports happening in real time, happening on time amid the COVID-19 era. Speaking of on time, I was not. We hope to be back by pick 16. We are not. The draft is now on pick 18. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis, and that is what we have Dave Cook for. He'll recap the draft in more ways than you might even want him to, but at the very least, he can give us 16 and 17 while we were away.
So we've been talking all evening about how this draft has been kind of bland. Everything's kind of going where it should go. And then all of a sudden, the Falcons go and take a guy we thought might end up actually being a Viking, maybe not even at 22nd pick, but the 25th pick. And that's A.J. Terrell, the cornerback out of Clemson, where if you watch the national championship game, yeah, he was the speed bump that Joe Burrow kept throwing over in a really bad national championship game. But he's a big kid, a tough kid. And then the Cowboys blew the roof off the place by picking CeeDee Lamb, wide receiver out of Oklahoma, which, guys, I mean, if you're the Cowboys, there's some things you do really well and there's some things you don't do really well. And what you don't do really well was still available on the draft. And you picked a wide receiver for an offense that already scores an awful lot of points. So, Brian, you talked about Randy Moss being picked during the time of Jake Reed and Chris Carter, and I think Dallas is trying to replicate.
Well, and what's also interesting is who did Randy Moss point out as public enemy number one when he got passed over time and time again in the draft? That was Dallas. I'm not saying that CeeDee Lamb is going to be the next Randy Moss. I'm absolutely not going to say that. But
Right.
I'm wondering if Jerry Jones didn't want to fall victim to something similar.
That's actually really that's actually possible. We'll read that in his book, but yeah, because they said he's tried to draft guys because he passed on Moss and he's made some risk takes afterwards. So yeah, that's absolutely real.
So it's interesting because they give Dak Prescott weapon after weapon after weapon. The only weapon they won't give him is a contract he wants. If you're Dak Prescott, what's your mentality after seeing this pick? You can't hate it, but it is a head scratcher based on your team's needs.
Yeah, if you're worried about your numbers, it's the right pick, right? Unless you're worried about the W, which he should be. He's getting to that point where he's got to start winning, right?
Well, but here's the catch 22, Topher, because if you're worried about your numbers, as Dave said, it's a great pick. Numbers, albeit the win should be focused on, numbers get contracts. Dak lights it up with another good wide receiver. He's going to be able to demand that much more from somebody, whether it's Dallas or somebody else.
I think Dak's going to be loving having some more extra tools and some guys to play with out there because it's going to help their offense even more. And their offense, you mentioned, Dave, is able to put up some big points. It'll be interesting how he's able to handle ball distribution amongst all those different guys. They're going to want to have their piece of the pie to put up their own numbers, right?
Yeah.
So that'll be interesting. It'll be, I think a lot of it will depend on how the rest of the draft shakes out for the Cowboys as far as addressing needs later in the draft, possibly, or making some trades. So that will be, time will tell. The Cowboys didn't help themselves a ton on the field, but they are going to put up some points and they're going to be fun to watch offensively.
The Miami Dolphins just drafted another Viking target, and that's USC offensive lineman Austin Jackson. And the coolest thing about Austin Jackson, I don't know if you've guys heard this.
No, I'm already going to tell you right now. The coolest thing is he gets to protect Tua. So what's the second coolest thing about it?
No, you're going to say to yourself, boy, I wish I wouldn't have said anything now. Because his sister had cancer, and he gave bone marrow donor right before the season started this year. So all season long, he didn't have the greatest year, but, I mean, he was recovering from something pretty noble.
Absolutely. Saved the life of his sister, Autumn. I think it was a rare form of anemia. I'm not going to claim to have known that. I'm going to claim that ESPN just put that on the TV. So it is fun to have real sports happening in real time. And absolutely, the Austin Jackson story is a neat one. And that's the other thing of the draft that sometimes gets overlooked because we get so obsessed with X's and O's. And I think back to when the Vikes drafted Mac Alexander. The story behind Mac Alexander was awesome. And I think we got enamored with him, and they didn't play particularly well. I would hope for Austin Jackson it can be twofold. You can get enamored with the story, but he produces on the field also. Difference is he's an offensive tackle. You're not going to know if he's producing on the field. If he is, you're going to hear his name more tonight than you do any other time.
Yeah, that's true. The funny thing with Mac Alexander is how everybody said And I guess I was in that too. What a wonderful defensive back he was in college. But there was one thing he couldn't do:
Intercept the ball.
intercept the ball. He had, what did they say? He had the lowest completion percentage in college football his junior and senior year, and he had no interceptions. And so he did prove true to his pre-draft work. But you're right. Austin Jackson has a great backstory. He's young, like might be the youngest player in the draft. And you're right. Who's he get to protect? He gets to protect Tua. So
how is this draft looking if you're the Miami Dolphins? Because honestly, Brian Flores did a pretty good job last year with a pretty terrible roster. I mean, if you think of bad football teams, obviously there were 4 teams that drafted ahead of Miami, so there were teams that were worse. But again, stuck in kind of the languishing and bad, the Miami Dolphins for me are the headliners. Is this the start of the digging out process? Because these 2 picks, you need a good quarterback and you need protection for them. They've done both of those things.
Yeah, this is how you build up a team, isn't it? You got your quarterback, you got your lineman, but I mean, I'm watching Bleacher Report as we're going on here, and they are tearing this pick up as far as being really, really too early for a kid that really hasn't done anything. He checks all the boxes, but he hasn't produced.
Yeah, this is a guy that's obviously a high ceiling guy, I think, and that's what they're trying to do, I guess, in Miami. They might be thinking, hey, we're going to just try to grow Tua and Jackson together and try to build this team together, because I don't think they're going to have high expectations to win now, but they're looking to just assemble the pieces and start putting this thing together, maybe, the Cowboys with Troy Aikman, I guess.
Yep,
just letting it run out there and let's see what happens.
A little bit like that. So if it starts at 1-15, nobody panic, because that's how the Aikman regime did too, right?
I just
Exactly.
Point out how good Topher is at getting in the draft lingo now. You're throwing in. Pretty soon, somebody's going to think, "Boy, Topher really pays attention to the draft."
Well, I think what he's got, and I love him dearly, but I think what he's got is he's got a draft terminology thesaurus, and he just checks. You said checking all the boxes. He just checks to be like, all right, I used that one in the first segment. I used that one in the second. I got to get these 3 in. High ceiling was a good one, though. I like it. I like it.
Hold on.
Thank you.
Vegas is in again. I'll tell you what, man. They got another pick, man.
Pick is in.
They just drafted the other cornerback from from Ohio State, David Arnett.
Wow.
So that means 4 quarterbacks off the board.
Yeah, and he's solid in that bottom of the second tier almost always when you see him ranked. That's interesting. Today
that's a plus for the Vikings.
I probably saw a dozen mock drafts today, Brian, and Arnett was drafted by the Vikings, and a lot of them almost always in the second round.
So
he's a guy that gets in trouble a lot. He's one of those gets too aggressive on the field and lets his emotions get a part of him. So
does that mean the Bengals are on the phone right now trying to see if they can acquire him anyway?
Exactly. Well, Montez doesn't play there any longer, so they can't have that.
But is this a plus for the Vikings? Because both corners that we've talked most about with them, be it Gladney, the shorter variety, but the 100% health variety, or Jalen Johnson, the good size at 6'1", but the shoulder issues, both still available. The thing we got to keep remembering is they don't have 1 first-round pick. The Vikes, they have 2. So we've got a lot of fun coming up here.
I think that the thing we talked about is less likely, though. I don't think they're going to draft both cornerbacks. Arnett was somebody I thought that Zimmer might push for, frankly. But now I think that I think you're right. We talked Johnson yesterday a lot when we were on the radio. And, if I wouldn't be surprised terribly if we found out somebody moved up to get him before the Vikings. Wow, that's surprising. Arnett.
See, this is what Dave wanted, Topher. We basically declared that numbers 1 through 15 were a little too vanilla for us. Now Dave is getting all the he hasn't had this much late night movement since before Avery and Aaron were born.
Yeah, things are really shaking up a little bit with teams reaching for players and things. We talked about how they were going chalk through the first 13, 14 picks, and now here we are, at pick 20 on the clock, and things are starting to shake up. That snowball's shaking.
So here's a question then. So the Raiders have drafted Ruggs and now Arnett. Last year, Mayock and Gruden seemed to do really well. You wonder if Mayock, because this is, he's done this his whole life, draft. That's pretty much all he's done, right? you wonder if he's got magic sauce. Do you know what I mean? What do they see in our net that the rest of us are missing? Because Mayock, this has been his entire career, just the draft. So he has some theories and things. I wonder if, we're going to look back at this in a year and say, yeah, they knew more than we did about our net.
Well, I think you could be onto something there. You're either on something or you're onto something, but it also might be the only time that you can mention magic sauce in Las Vegas in the same sentence and be okay. But yes, unless you really get into Mike Mayock's performances on Vikings preseason broadcasts, this is pretty much his deal. Can he do it well? It looks like it. As much as I would hate to be on a parallel with the Raiders, I'm still a little intrigued by the Vikings have the 2 first round picks we've been discussing.
Yes.
The Raiders have 2. They've taken a defensive back and a wide receiver. Sounds vaguely familiar.
It does. I agree. So we talked about Tom or Jackson a minute ago, what the draft guys were saying. The Raiders just got 2 F grades for taking Arnett. Not that he's a bad cornerback, but taking him so much early. They could have got him next round. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that the Vikings looking at wide receiver cornerback right now, if you were betting money, I would say that's the combination that you bet on. But until Cesar Ruiz is gone, that's going to be my guy tonight.
That is going to be your guy. I hear that and it just makes me hungry. I feel like it should be an Italian dish at the Olive Garden. Tomato allergy be damned. Give me the Cesar Ruiz, please. But I'm not 100% sure what will happen here because I keep in the back of my mind going back to the first guy we ever saw in a mock for the Vikings, and that was Jefferson from LSU. Still sitting there.
Yeah, he's butter. I mean, he is smooth. There's nothing sudden or special about him, but he does everything. I mean, he's kind of like Thielen in a way. I mean, he does everything well. He's not, superb at any one thing. It wouldn't be a bad pick. Just we would be like Giants fans. The Giants got a defensive tackle that just did what they needed him to do. Jefferson would just kind of be that, a wide receiver just like we need. Not a whole lot of frills.
Yeah. We would be the much more passive-aggressive version of Giants fans.
Well,
exactly.
That's very true. I worry with Jefferson. I just worry about the Eagles sitting right ahead of the Vikings and him potentially landing there.
Yes, I agree. And again, the LSU bump, do we really know how good these guys are? Because, I mean, they have 4 offensive linemen that are going to be drafted in the next 2 days. The quarterback's a Heisman Trophy winner. The running back's going to be drafted either tonight or tomorrow morning. Their other wide receiver will probably be the number 1 pick overall next year. I mean, Jefferson is smooth, but it's not like the best cornerback on the other team was ever with him.
Right. Well, I also think the other piece of what you're asking yourself is, what do you make of college offenses? Is anybody really running a true pro set anymore? Or is it, not everybody's gadget gimmicky, but college football always has a wrinkle of that. Yep. So were they just the best at that sport? Or were they the best at being next level ready?
Yep. No, I agree with you. Were they just prepared? Was their scheme better than the other team's scheme?
Well, to that end, we always talk about it with basketball. We're quick to talk about, well, this person coached them in college, so they're ready. I know everybody loves to talk about Joe Exotic, but there's only one real Tiger King, and that's the coach at LSU. Those kids are ready, at least in that regard.
Yep, they're ready, and you never worry about the kids from Alabama because they were brought up in a pro-style offense. So, yeah, it'll be interesting. That's my only worry about Jefferson is, he was never the guy that had the number one cornerback on him. It was always the other guy.
So let me just put it out there for you because Topher brought up a good hypothetical. If the Eagles take Jefferson at 2020, is it 21 or 21? 21. The Vikings have 22 and 25.
Yes.
Eagles have 21. Jacksonville's on the clock right now. The pick is in at 20. So let's say Jefferson. All right. So let's say Jefferson disappears now with the Eagles on the clock at 21. If you're the Vikings at 22, do you pick your corner du jour? And then at 25, is T. Higgins too much of a reach at wide receiver?
Me or you, Toph?
I think he might be a little bit of a reach. So I think at that point, maybe they look to trade back a little bit and see what they can do. Or do they reach for, I don't know, another, like a safety or something. It's interesting. I don't know.
I think that
if you're reaching for a safety, you're trading Anthony Harris to pick up some veteran somewhere.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yes.
That's the other piece.
I think that you got to get your cornerback, but at that point, the other position, I mean, is the tackle from Houston. Jones.
No, I agree with you, but we brought that up on Cool 101.7 this morning, and you thrashed me for it. So, how the plot thickens as the moment draws closer.
Well, it's because look at where we're at. I'm not sure I'd take Jones because he's a risk offensive tackle at this point, and there's other risky offensive tackles you can draft. But yeah, cornerback, wide receiver, I'm still going to plug Cesar Ruiz until it doesn't happen. But yeah, if you panic and you decide you need that tackle, then you draft that tackle.
So Topher, do we need to christen him Cesar Ruiz instead of Ronnie Rodriguez? I'm already advocating right now for a fantasy football team name change.
I'm excited to see where Cesar Ruiz ends up. It's going to be funny. We've been, teasing him about Cesar Ruiz all afternoon, and if he ends up in purple, it'll be Dave will be having the last laugh. That's for sure.
Well, now there is something to be said for somebody who comes in with offensive line flexibility. He can play different positions. But let's not forget that Pat Elflein was touted that way too. Award-winning guard, award-winning center. Not that many years later, he sucks at all of them. I'm just going to be blunt.
He's got a little bit of Johnny Flynn to him, though. He got hurt and just never came back.
So who's Pat Elflein's Steph Curry? There's something for you to Google.
So who knew? It's never been those two probably have never been put into a search engine together.
Right. But again, the beginning of the NFL draft coverage tonight, courtesy of the guys from the Northland Sports page, Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis, we talked about O.J. Mayo. We had to get Johnny Flynn and Steph Curry in the mix. It's a bummer that that'll be on a blooper reel for some other time because that was great. Stuff that no one will see.
I've got it recording.
For the record, Dave had the Tampa Bay Buccaneers trading O.J. Mayo. They have the rights to just about everyone else this offseason, so how they pulled that off, I'll never know.
Well, they got Kevin Love out of the deal. That's the thing. That was the crazy part of it. It wasn't the fact that they traded Mayo. It's that they got Love in return.
Right, and they got that guy to come out of retirement, Eric Piatkowski. Didn't he used to play in the NBA too? Oh, no, Rob Gronkowski, sorry.
Hey, no, that's a little too close.
Hey, no. I just pulled Eric Piatkowski out with no issue. That's like Pitsnoggle for you guys.
I thought Jordan Love was still available right now, Dave. What are you talking about being on the Buccaneers?
Oh, Jordan Love, isn't that the name of that show that's on Sunday about the Bulls?
Something like that.
Man, I'm taking a lot of heat here, guys.
Absolutely.
This is your day.
We are 3.5 minutes away from the Eagles picking. Why do we care so much about the Eagles? Great question. But because they're right in front of the Vikings. This is going to play a big factor. See, this is what nobody talks about when they look at mock draft after mock draft after mock draft.
Jefferson.
I think you're right because I'm seeing him on the screen an awful lot too. But this is what nobody talks about with a bunch of mocks. They always look at who did their team take. They don't look at what anybody around them did because, 2 or 3 picks north or south of you could change any time.
Well, that's exactly it. I mean, it's going to be – you can only pick guys that are available to you at that time. And so I'm sure the Vikings, the last few picks, had their short list going, and they're just hoping that maybe a guy doesn't get sniped off in front of them. And then just like that, as we kind of talked about a few minutes ago, Jefferson might be soaring high with the Eagles.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, though, Brian, because a lot of the guys that we've talked about Vikings being interested in are here, right? I mean, the Gladney kid, Fulton from LSU is here. The tackle is here. Is this a spot where if New England wants to move up or somebody wants to move up that you take their call right now?
Well, and this is what's interesting because, again, the first guy in every mock that you saw for the Vikes was Jefferson. And as mocks kept coming, a dozen or so more names trickled in, and people forgot to go back to Jefferson. All of a sudden we are, and there's a fairly good chance he goes right in front of him, and all of a sudden we hope the Vikings brass knows what to do because Vikings fans are going, wait, what? Well, what are we panicking about? We had a bunch of other names an hour ago.
Yeah, this is padded room time, though, now, Brian. Now that it's our decision to make, it's going to be like, oh, my gosh, what do we do? We can't screw this up.
All right, the Eagles pick is in. Well, you're right about not being able to screw it up, but the good news is usually when you make a poor first-round pick, it's tough to atone for it. The Vikings have to wait 2 more selections to try to make up for it again.
Well, that's that conversation connecting with T. Higgins, I do still wonder if the Vikings brass and for sure the Vikings fans will have Treadwell visions if we hear T. Higgins names right now. Tall.
Well, to be fair though, and I understand the dimensions that you're going to go with the tall, the game being similar, but I have a feeling that you have either purple Kool-Aid Viking fans or you have purple pessimism Viking fans, and you're going to have one side of them think that every wide receiver is going to be the next Randy Moss, and the other side of them are going to think Troy Williamson and Laquan Treadwell just reappeared. So for that reason, I almost hope that wide receiver doesn't happen here at all.
Ooh, Dave's listening close. It is obviously
sorry.
a high risk, high reward position. I mean, you look at wide receivers drafted in the first round, especially later in the first round, there's a lot more misses than there is hits when it comes to skill positions like that. So, but it's one of those positions as well. If you do hit on a guy, it could be a game breaker for you. So
true, but in Viking history, aren't they the polar opposite? Because Moss was late, Percy was late, Williamson and Treadwell were kind of earlier. They whiffed.
Yeah, that's
a little bit.
Williamson was 7. Laquan was what, 15?
Cordero Patterson, where would you put him? Is he a boom or a bust?
It took me a long time to remember that he was a wide receiver.
He was, exactly.
His kick return game was phenomenal. It looks like Mr. Jefferson's off the board.
Yeah.
There we go.
Jefferson was the safe one. So now it's going to be interesting. Okay, so my pick is going to be Jeff Gladney, TCU.
It depends on which Google piece you buy into, because Gladney's an interesting character because a lot of different mocks have him at 5'10". His Wikipedia page has him at 6 foot. When I'm drafting a corner, not to make another Visante Shenko comment, but 2 inches means a lot when you're looking at a cornerback.
They have Jason Rieger on the screen right now. Did something happen?
I have Doug Peterson and Howie Roseman on the screen. That would be the head coach and the GM of the Eagles.
They picked Jalen Rieger. I thought they picked Jefferson. I thought it was a done deal. They picked Jalen Rieger out of TCU. There's one of my bets gone. I thought the Vikings might come away all horn frog in the first round.
All right, so something went haywire there because not 3 minutes ago, Topher, I don't know if you're watching the same as me. I know Dave's not. But there was a shot of
delayed.
He was on the phone. There was a shot of Jefferson in his home on the phone clenching a fist. So can we just hope that was Rick Spielman on the phone early? But they don't even have the Vikings on the clock yet.
That's just bizarre. I agree because I saw him cross the screen here too. But now
the drama
over Rieger.
And by the way, here comes the Eagles selection straight out of Roger Goodell's mouth, which I have on mute, which is symbolism in a lot of ways. Roger Goodell, in an odd way, still looks like Mr. Rogers turning right out of make-believe when he announces the picks here, the new virtual format. But let's see.
Interesting, him hanging out in the man cave.
Absolutely. It's a pretty good one, though.
Well, I mean, when you make the kind of money he does, you better have a decent-looking man cave.
So Lake Superior Law doesn't? I got that one wrong.
Exactly.
All right, so they did get Jalen Rieger out of TCU. It is now official.
So there's one of those guys that it's tough because his quarterback play was terrible. So was Rieger held back because of his quarterback play, or did he not help his quarterback get any better?
That will be the chicken or the egg question. So now the Vikings are on the clock. So now, Dave, I've always talked to you about what I don't like about this entire evening. What I like now is some of the paralysis by analysis will end because it's time to put up or shut up and make a pick. But now that Jefferson is still available, it's like the game show. Do you go with your first answer? Do you go with your gut? A month ago, it was Jefferson out of LSU. It was going to be a Viking. And then it was, well, what if he's not? And we came up with 17 different options. Well, now he's right there. Do you go with where you started here?
Again, the New York Giant fan in me wants to rebel, but I think he's the best guy on the board and he fits a spot. And I just don't know if you overthink this. And just, I'm not a huge fan, but he is the right guy in this spot. There's very little risk in him being bad, right?
I agree with that. So are we pretty much destined to have wide receiver and then corner, or corner and then wide receiver, and you're looking at your offensive line help tomorrow? As bad as this team needs offensive line help, is there nobody here tonight, unless you're trading way down, that you need to get till tomorrow?
Well, I almost wonder that with the receiver, though, because there's nobody behind us that's going to be pining for Jefferson either. So do you take your cornerback now and cross your fingers that New England's not going to draft a receiver and that New Orleans isn't going to draft a receiver?
It's interesting that you pose that question because I was going to pose it to you in reverse. If they go Jefferson, are you doing it thinking New England isn't taking a wideout and New Orleans doesn't need a wideout, so you're going to get your wide receiver at 25? Or are you doing it knowing New England doesn't need a corner, New Orleans doesn't need a corner, and you're going to get your corner at 25? Welcome to the luxury of having 2 first-round picks.
Yeah, maybe this is where somebody wants to jump up and trade in front of New Orleans to get Patrick Queen, the linebacker from LSU, and the Vikings trade back a couple of spots because of just that. Because there's a bunch of guys that they could draft right now, and so if you trade back 4 or 5 spots, a number of those guys are still going to be there. And both linebackers will be gone, and the Vikings won't draft one of the linebackers, I hope.
Right. So again, we were 3.5 minutes away from the Vikings' first round pick of 2020 being in. The pick is now in according to my TV screen. So all of the prognostication is about to end, and soon the analysis will start. So the guys from the Northland Sports page, Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis. Pick number 22 belongs to the purple. And of course, ESPN's got a Subway commercial going on.
Exactly. It's going to be interesting to see where this goes. What happens? I feel like Jefferson's still right there for the taking.
Yeah, I kind of think that almost has to be the guy, right? Because he is.
I think so.
Least, if you're risk averse and your job's on the line for next year, he's the most risk averse player that's left.
Well, and again, with 2 first round picks, can you take one to appease your fans who are pining for, as unfair as this might be, they're pining for a direct replacement for Stephon Diggs, and then you take the one that makes more of the X's and O's sense, picking up a corner because you don't have one, or picking up an offensive lineman because that's been a decade-long narrative. But again, we don't think there's an offensive lineman worthy of a 25th pick, even though we're on 22 right now.
Right. I mean, you really will be taking a risk if you do any of the offensive tackles. I honestly do think that Ruiz is good. So they just flashed an Iowa Hawkeye across the screen. It was really small, but would they take Epinesa here, the defensive end from Iowa?
That would be a huge wrinkle, and I'm not going to lie to you, that would disappoint me kind of a lot.
Yeah, that would disappoint me too. I mean, yeah, that would disappoint me. I got to believe it's going to be Gladney or Jefferson here. But that little defensive end thing came up, and I'm like, ugh. Imagine if it's him or Gross Matos from Penn State. Yuck.
Right. Defensive end is a need, but there's a long list of needs, and that's not near the top for me.
Where do you think the left go solo?
Yeah, I agree. And I'm still feeling with that Jefferson's going to be the guy. They're going to, get that wide receiver spot filled, get a low risk. Remember, both Spielman and Zimmer are on their their last year of their deals, the contract situation. They need to do something this season to extend their Vikings careers. So,
and you just can't have BC Johnson being your number 2 wide receiver next year. You just can't. Not if you expect to win.
No,
I agree with that. I would have bigger plans of converting Irv Smith to wide receiver 2 before I'd go with BC a wide receiver 2, to be honest with you. Or there's Tajay Sharp that's in the fold.
Right, but Tajay Sharp's a good 3 on any decent team.
He is. That was very Twins-like of the Vikings. Often the Twins pick up a third pitcher to be their number 1. The Vikings picked up wide receiver 3 and asked him to play wide receiver 2. All right, no disrespect to your Broncos, Toph, but I could care less what Melvin Gordon has to say. I love Steve Jordan. I don't care what Cam Jordan has to say. Let's get to pick number 22 already. Yes, I'm directly mocking ESPN telecast right now.
Dave's locked into this right now.
Yeah, because they said something about New England trading, so I don't know if they traded up. We got pictures of Jefferson all over the place right now. So whomever drafted Jefferson.
It better be the Vikings. I'll tell you what, he doesn't even have to transition color-wise. This is going to sound completely ill-informed, but he looked good in purple and gold already. Just stick with what works.
Minnesota Vikings drafted Justin Jefferson, wide receiver, LSU.
All right, so after 17,000 mock drafts that had different names from the first one, the Vikings draft the very first one.
Yeah, that's interesting because his comp is Stephon Diggs. He is butter, right? He's decent speed. He has great hands. We've said he hasn't really played against the best cornerback on the other team, but that doesn't make him bad. It just means that the other guy is superhuman. So I think he's safe. We've talked about it 4 or 5 times. He's not going to come in and bust So, and that's what they need. They need a guy who's going to perform.
So, Dave, let's get to the more important question. The very first NSP that we did in the new studio, we kicked it off with the theme from the Jeffersons. Do we do it again when we return?
Oh, yes. That's awesome. See, Toph, this is the thing. I don't think about that stuff, Toph. And then you hear it from Brian, and it's like, oh my gosh, why didn't I think of that?
I do have a purpose on this show. Contrary to popular belief, I do have a role.
I love it. It's a good pick. It's a good pick for the Vikings right there.
It's
I like
safe.
it.
Yep.
We had so many what-if wrinkles in this draft, and it basically went, let's not call it chalk because it wasn't that. But as far as the Vikings are concerned, whatever wrinkles were on their way, 1 through 21, everything smoothed back out by 22, exactly how they thought it would.
Imagine how easy it would be if Jefferson was their guy, right? Imagine how easy it would have been to panic and trade ahead of the Eagles.
Absolutely. It's they showed some brass. If Jefferson really was their guy, just to a strong stomach to sit around and see what the Eagles were going to do there, because there was definitely a good chance that Jefferson would have ended up there with Philadelphia.
Yeah.
All right, now the pick is about to become official. And I'll tell you what, I just saw the first skull chant I didn't like. It was Roger Goodell doing it with the fans. But it is Justin Jefferson, the wide receiver out of LSU. So everybody can hang on to their Justin Jefferson purple and gold memorabilia or just re-up and get some new stuff.
A's across the board according to the draft analysis on BR.
Wow, this is going to be good. And the thing that people don't know about Justin Jefferson, wow, now we've got a trade alert with New England right after the Vikes, by the way.
Okay.
There we go. That's your hearing, Dave.
Justin Jefferson grew from 5'7" to 6'1" as a junior in high school.
Jeez, that had to hurt.
Right.
Is this Green Bay moving up to draft Patrick?
No.
King?
This is two of my favorite teams involved. The Patriots and the LA Chargers just completed a trade. The LA Chargers are on the clock again.
They're not taking Love, so who are they going after?
Yeah, you're right, because they got their guy in Herbert, so they're not taking Jordan Love.
This has got to be either. Well, what wide receiver would you trade up for? Out, maybe?
Well, why would they need a wide receiver between Keenan Allen and Mike Williams and that whole group?
Yeah, that's true. So it's got to be an offensive lineman, and so they're coming up for the.
Either that, or did they come up to get a corner because the Vikings didn't the first time, and they want to get a corner before the Vikings do the second time?
Oh, that's actually really good, Brian. Yeah, that could be. Yeah, and then that would probably be my guy. I really want my guy. I'm sorry, I want Gladney.
I'm just waiting for Cesar Ruiz. I still got hope for him at 25.
Yeah, where's Cesar Ruiz here?
I'm wondering if Dave was ever a big fan of Randy Ruiz when he was with the Twins.
No, because I couldn't say his name.
Because you have to Google him.
I struggled with his name. That's why I got Ruiz so well now, because I worked on it years ago.
All right, so before we dive into what will be the Chargers at 23, we need to pay more homage to the Vikings here. We've been leading up to them all night, and they finally picked. We can't spend 90 seconds on it and call it good.
Yep.
My first worry immediately is this. We talk about it with Christian Ponder, the jersey over Topher's left shoulder, draft spot and expectation. Now, 22 is not an expectation-filled spot, but you're still a first-round pick. And you're coming in a year that Stephon Diggs left. Let's please not proclaim Justin Jefferson Stephon Diggs now. Is that accurate?
We've done this before. Williamson/Troy.
Right.
Williamson struggled, and he was not a good pick. Don't get me wrong, but how much worse was it because people had their hands on their hips because they didn't like the Moss trade? I mean, Diggs is gone. What we can't do is we can't make Justin Jefferson have to be Stephon Diggs this year. There's going to be some rough patches. He's going to be smooth, and Olabisi Johnson with speed kind of is how I see him. Johnson makes all the catches that are thrown at him. So we can't expect Diggs. We just need to expect an upgrade from Johnson, who would be the number 2 right now.
Well, the other thing, too, is this. I mean, quite frankly, I don't know how the offseason calendar is going to work now, but in former off seasons, if you will, I always used as of June 1st, somebody's going to be available that you didn't think would. And I always thought that with veteran receivers. Still could be. I don't know how the calendar might be different now, but I still want a proven wide receiver. Justin Jefferson is nice. Is it an upgrade over BC Johnson? Probably, just on resume alone, at least collegiately speaking. But are you happy with Thielen, Jefferson, and BC Johnson? You shouldn't be. No. Again, Sharp is there. I get it. I need one more veteran in that room.
Could it be the old number 12?
Sure, but is it a gimmick or is it really a quality idea? That still remains to be seen.
Well, he has tread left on the tires, to use another draft cliche. He hasn't played in so long. He's not been injured or concussed or any of that.
Is it a little bit like when Bert Blyleven tried to return to the Twins in the early to mid 90s?
Yes, it is. A lot like that, actually.
Cool name, and it didn't break camp, you know?
So the Chargers drafted the linebacker from Oklahoma, who I said was going to be a Green Bay Packer, it looks like. So that means both linebackers are going to be gone, because no way New Orleans doesn't draft Patrick Queen. I have to believe they're drafting Queen, which means Green Bay is screwed when it comes to their biggest position of need. The Ravens are probably throwing stuff against the wall because they needed him as well. But the Vikings have to be thrilled, because now whomever they had next on their board after Jefferson should be, they can choose the pick of the litter, because Queen's got to be next.
Right. For the Packers, though, I think you just shift your attention. You might actually go to Jordan Love to be the heir apparent to Aaron Rodgers. You might actually go to KJ Hamler because they need somebody else to play wide receiver. Is it early? Sure, but if you can't get the other position of need, don't you go to the next one?
Yes, and the guys you were saying about Green Bay, I think that's the guys they need. They need, super quick guys that can make things happen after they catch the ball, because they have a whole bunch of 6'5" guys that are fast that can't really do anything. But you got to have another guy like Randall Cobb used to be, right? Who would make the plays, the dirty plays, underneath plays, and then make something else happen.
I agree with you, but let me ask you this. So when we were on the radio on Cool 101.7 this morning, you did indeed have Kenneth Murray going to the Packers. That meant Kenneth Murray was going at 30. He now goes at 23. Does that mean that this draft order got altered somewhere, or does that mean that just a team like the Chargers noticed, hey, we got a golden opportunity here to swipe somebody, let's go do it?
Well, I think they probably liked Murray and realized that if they wanted to get him, they had to move up, and they weren't going to move up. I would bet that the two teams they were talking to was New England and us, because the Niners have made it clear. I don't know if the last time I saw a mock draft that didn't have Patrick Queen going to New Orleans. So if they wanted Murray, it was going to have to be one of those two spots, and maybe New England got the better deal and made the move up.
You know what I like most about this special edition NFL draft show right now is we do have telecasts on in our respective viewing areas. And now it feels more like radio, because when we do these Saturday bits, we're not TV guys, but we do have to focus on the camera a little bit or look at each other. Now it does feel like radio, because I'm looking at the TV, I'm looking at the window, I'm looking at the light, I'm looking at text messages. When we do radio, nobody sees it. Why? Because it's not a visual medium. But in a 2-hour show, we look 37 different directions. I feel a little more at home tonight than I have on previous Saturdays.
You're not so locked in on the screen and seeing what the other two characters are up to. We're all paying attention to some different stuff. You're right. Just looking around a little bit.
Well, I don't know about you, Top, but I have been a little more locked in on Dave, because you and I were excited about seeing him in his element. Oh. I don't have kids, so I may never get to see, obviously, children on Christmas morning again. So this might have to be it for me.
So there's a real chance that the Vikings see. I know I just went past it. I got it. I just proved your point. As soon as I started talking, I said I'm proving Brian's point. Since the Vikings should have pick of the litter here, right? And there's going to be more than one player. Maybe this is the spot they trade down now. It's a lot more likely now. If you got Green Bay demanding a certain wide receiver, it's going to come from the Vikings. So, gosh.
Wow, you're not going to get – I'm going to go Lavelle Neal on that. I got to assume what applies to MLB might apply to the NFL. You're not going to get an inside the division trade.
It depends on how much they offer, right? Because if Green
But that's
Bay
what I mean.
Desperate,
who's going to try to – and this isn't a pun specifically for you, but who's going to try to buffalo the other one?
Yeah, that's you're right. That's the key to this. But, maybe this is where Cincinnati decides they want to come up and get somebody, and then the Vikings have the first pick in the second round and get a chance then to take time and look at everybody who's left and make a decision, not with 5 minutes on the clock, but, 24 hours.
Yeah, that's possible. It's interesting to think if they have two corners, because we seem to have two corners that we're thinking of, Gladney or Johnson. And if it's the extent of Johnson's injury is tough to tell. Gladney, whether he's 5'10" or 6 foot, is tough to tell. But if you think you can win with either one,
You got to do it.
do you trade down? Because one should still be there, right? I mean, are you assuming that 26 through the end of round one won't rob you of both corners?
Right, because I think the third corner in that, the safety valve, if you will, was Terrell. That was always the guy that, well, if we don't get those two, Terrell should be available.
Well, let me satisfy the homers of the group because you said safety valve. What about Antoine Winfield Jr.? And then you deal Anthony Harris and you explore maybe the Trent Williams bandwagon or some other position of need by freeing up that money.
What if you think that Winfield could be a corner, a slot corner? He runs fast enough. He's smart enough. You need the spot filled.
His gene pool played fine at corner if you want to go another step further.
We could figure out how to get the 26 jersey back for him. Didn't Trey Waynes wear that? It's available.
He did.
There you go.
He did. But if you
want
my honest opinion, it never should have been worn again after Robert Smith, but I digress.
Then could Antoine Winfield just write Junior across the back then if he wore 26?
I like it.
I like that too. Let's make that happen.
Only if I can get you a Chris Cook jersey instead of a Delvin Cook jersey, so you have Cook on your back.
I should get one that says Junior on it as well.
You should. I don't know if you're paying that close of attention, but I likened you to Mel Kiper in one of our earlier segments, and I tagged Junior on the end of both of you.
Thank you.
I was just distracted.
What's
going on, Brian?
If you want to be extremely accurate, I'm the only one on this dais that isn't a junior.
It's true.
Right.
This is true.
I love my dad dearly. I miss him a great deal, but I'm glad I was never named Eugene. I'm just going to stick with that.
Yeah, it works for people.
It does.
Yeah.
In particular, they work for Eugene Robinson was a fine member of a secondary. He just didn't have very good weekends.
You just go
your
with
boy Dale Gaspy is Eugene.
It would be good because then you could do that you could do like E, whatever your middle name is, Prudhomme. It looks fancy.
My middle name is Matthew. So I like
E Matthew.
Right, but if you want to get into the initials game, to borrow from K-Fan a little bit, I like that Jen joined my family for obvious reasons, but my mom's middle name is Marie. My middle name is Matthew. So we had Bump, Pump, and then Jen was Jump because you got BMP, PMP, and JMP. Because we should have had Jump with my sister Jill, but somehow my mom worked Renee in there. But anyway, there's completely going off the wall.
Story.
In the NFL draft. That's when you know it's 7 minutes after 10 and you've been on since about 7 minutes after 7 when you get into your NFL draft analysis and you get into cool story, bro. But we're doing it this way. We're doing it this way due to COVID-19. And with New Orleans on the clock, I got to bring it up because Sean Payton was one of the first sports names to be associated. So it's obviously been an interesting offseason for that whole organization. Not a lot of people like him for a lot of things that he does as a coach. But that all takes a back seat when you look at what he went through.
Yeah, that's true, and it does because that's one of my least favorite teams. But Sean Payton's a Hall of Fame coach, and besides all of that stuff, the fact he's an HOF coach, the fact that the Saints are not a favorite of mine, making it through COVID makes him a unique and special person in sports, frankly.
So are we essentially assuming here, Topher and Dave, that unlike the Eagles at 21, New Orleans has a slight bearing on what the Vikings do in a moment at 25 because they're right in front of them. But in terms of positional need, maybe they don't.
They don't. No, the only weird thing would be is if they went and got, the Ayuk kid from Arizona State, the burner wide receiver, because that's one thing they don't have. They don't have that explosive receiver. But goodness gracious, feel free to stop somebody.
No, I agree. Yeah, this pick that the Saints have, they're going to be picking something different. I think whoever the Vikings have, if they've got someone in mind that they want to take this next pick, if teams aren't banging on their door trying to move up, then they're not worried about what the Saints are doing right now.
If I'm a Saints fan, I am pounding the table for Patrick Queen, the LSU middle linebacker. You need a middle linebacker, national champion. It's just there.
Dave, I got news for you. You're not a Saints fan, and you are pounding the table for Patrick Queen. It doesn't make a difference.
I will say.
So, Topher, here's the good question, though. Because Saturday, we'll be back with our normal Northland sports page covering a gamut of sports, but it will be day 3 in the draft. Are we going to be able to rein Dave in at all to give opinions on other things?
Well,
I got to be honest with you. I don't know what time the draft coverage starts on Saturday. So Dave might be locked in for the beginning of the show and then
Just
check
kind of
out a little
drift
bit if it
away.
starts at
Yeah.
11. Yeah.
Wouldn't that be
He'll
something?
he'll blame it on computer issues, but we'll know.
Yep. That sounds good, guys. Yep.
Yep.
Just a minute. The Browns are making pick number 210. Quit talking to me.
We're gonna Topher, you and I should be very cognizant of that and just say things like, so we hear Marshall Hockey is disbanding and St. Scholastica has a lot of public address openings. Not a problem? Yeah, sounds great, guys. Wish you the best of luck.
You just be locked in.
Right.
Wow.
Hey, look.
My God.
Oh, tell me you got this right.
Dave.
Look who's on the screen with the Vikings at 25. Cesar Ruiz.
He just got picked by the Saints.
He went right in front of the Vikings at 25. The Saints at 24 get Cesar Ruiz. Just after all credibility went out the window. Dave just got a ton because he almost nailed Cesar Ruiz's draft spot. But we literally just got done confirming for everybody that the Saints will have no bearing on what the Vikings do. Well, Dave Cook.
Wow.
As he's taking a selfie of his own sad reaction.
No, I did. I just sent Ted Keefe a text saying, "Oh my God, no, that was my guy."
That is your guy.
But again, other than your take with that, we still went into this with corner and then probably wide receiver, if not tackle. You're still probably going to get that here because Cesar Ruiz still wasn't a tackle.
Okay, here's though we talk about overthinking stuff, right? So if you thought to yourself, boy, we could probably use an offensive lineman, and then an offensive lineman comes off right before you, do you panic a little bit and go, oh my gosh, we got to get our guy now?
I don't know. I'm still holding out hope that Trent Williams is on the move, and he's on the moon to my favorite team. I don't know what it'll take at this point, but I'm still holding on to that thread. But I'm also the one that's dumb enough to hold on to the thread that Everson Griffin hasn't signed anywhere else. And don't tell me that Rick Spielman doesn't at least have conversations.
Oh, yeah, Rick Spielman's got his number handy. So the other thing that this might open up, Brian, is our little Antoine Winfield hope.
Yeah, I was wondering about that.
If Gladney's, because he's got some off-field stuff, he's kind of a toolbox.
Tell me how you really feel.
Winfield can play a lot of positions, and the Vikings are going to need a safety in the next year or two anyway, and they certainly need a cornerback now. I don't know.
Well, and culture is still the biggest buzzword on the planet in sports. And you just got rid of a guy who didn't want to play for your organization anymore in Stephon Diggs. Very rarely do you find a draft prospect that is basically public about saying, I would love to play there.
Yeah.
Go ahead and go with it. And let Zimmer just go, I've got a project on my hands that wants to be here already, swimming in a terrific gene pool. Let's play with this and see what we can do.
Yep, I like that pick. I still think it's going to be Gladney. He's been my guy for the last 2 months, but I could see that.
He's Winfield's obviously a game breaker. He's got the gene pool you mentioned, the speed. He thinks the game. Yeah, the smarts that he has. The way he thinks the game is on another level. The way he's able to read quarterbacks and stuff like that.
Wait a minute, guys. I got a trade alert coming across the screen. The Vikings have traded pick number 25 to the San Francisco 49ers.
Oh,
for 32
boy.
Or 31?
That I don't know because my TV's on mute, but the Vikings traded pick number 25. San Francisco's on the clock right now.
You know what that means, Brian? I'm just going to pat myself on the back here.
That they're taking
wanted Cesar Ruiz.
Or they're going to take Jones out of Houston at 32.
Yeah.
I got slammed for saying he'd go to the Vikings, so I'm going to pat myself on the back too. But what I need is either my remote control handy to unmute my TV.
Yeah, I'm trying to
I can figure out what the return is, or I just need a graphic already. All right. The voice you may hear in my background is the Adam Schefter, not his fake Twitter account that's been having a lot of fun with people.
Very, very interesting. What are the Vikings doing here?
Yeah, maybe this is Diggs.
Well, maybe that's why the Vikings wanted to get the heck out of that spot.
Yeah. Seriously, though.
Yeah, you talk about Winfield wanting to play for the Vikings. Diggs might be the one guy who wants nothing to do with the Vikings.
That would be so awkward.
Well, now here's the thing. This is interesting because Schefter just said that the 49ers moved up to take a wide receiver here, which makes sense but doesn't. Because I find it hard to
Ayuk,
believe the Vikings were going to take two of them.
Ayuk, is somebody coming up to take T Higgins, because Higgins would fit with this offense? I mean,
But you know what it honestly could mean, but I'm still waiting to see what the Vikings got in return in this trade. I'm sure the graphic will come up soon. But what it could mean is it could mean Winfield at say 32, which isn't a reach anymore.
Right.
Right. Here's what I'm seeing. So the Vikings are getting picks 31, 117, and 176.
Oh, so
For only number 25?
Correct. That's what Adam Schefter just
That's
tweeted.
a haul by Rick Spielman again.
Yeah, that's a nice trade.
Wow. All right.
And talking about Gophers,
so here's the Niners pick though in what would have been the Vikings spot.
Ayuk.
Brandon Ayuk.
Yep. Which he too in this mock draft full of wide receivers had been everywhere from 22, 25, 30 to the Packers to round 2.
Yeah, he was my Packer guy. It's the one I kind of thought they would go after if they went after wide receiver. Kind of a one-year wonder guy, but his 1 year was pretty dang good. He was a JUCO kid.
See, and I thought Mims would be the only one left. I still think Mims is going at 30 to Green Bay.
Mims is what they've got already, though. That's just.
But they like it, and that quarterback doesn't have a problem using that type of wide receiver.
Yeah, you're right.
You're dealing with a quarterback that made Jeff Aberderis good.
Yeah, you're right about that. He likes
or Jared Aberderis or whatever his name was.
Yeah. I don't know. That's a
making moves.
I think you're right, though, Brian. I think this really, really opens up the opportunity for Antoine Winfield Jr. to be a Viking.
Well, and I think what it also does, if you guys would like, is we were planning to go through the end of the Vikings picks and then break the segment. Well, now we've got to go to 31 to get the Vikings' final pick of the night. So do you guys want to break quickly as the Dolphins, Seahawks, and Ravens at 26, 27, and 28 are on the clock? We come back in a couple minutes and close out round 1 because now we know we're basically going to the end because our beloved purple is just about at the end.
Perfect.
All right, so signing off for the time being. We'll be back to close out round 1. It's the guys from the Northland Sports page doing the best we can. It's basically the Dave Cook Show, bringing you NFL Draft Insight. Brian Prudhomme, Dave Cook, Topher Davis. We will be right back. We didn't know if we'd stay up for all of round 1. The Vikings are making sure. It's like Teddy Bridgewater all over again. We'll be right back.